Will the latest EU plan to deal with the migrant crisis work? It includes 160,000 mandatory resettlements, beefing up external borders and strengthening common asylum systems. Images of migrants, many fleeing conflict in Syria, Libya and from the hands of so-called Islamic State, have shocked the public and forced political action. We brought British MEP Claude Moraes together with Hungarian MEP Kinga Gál and asked for their take on the recent migrant surges.
The images of Ilan have created a situation where there is a lot more compassion in the debate than there was. Secondly, there is a feeling that the European Union now must do something. Thirdly, there is an understanding that different member states are reacting differently for national reasons. And finally, there is a feeling that this refugee crisis will go on for some time, but that we now need a collective solution of some kind.
As a human being, everybody is touched. And it's the first thing everybody feels is solidarity, and that you need to help those in need. But it is very important to clarify questions which are rarely clarified these days here in this Parliament. One is, are still valid those principles that the borders of the Union have to be protected? There are places which are open for coming in, so you can't just dump in through the borders, because that won't work. You won't be able to help those who are really in need.
160,000 resettlements only. Is that adequate for today's numbers?
The resettlement can be regarded as an invitation that come, because then Europe will solve your problem. And I think this is not responsible enough. It doesn't mean that we are not solidar, that we don't understand what's going on, but I think these are wrong messages. So it has to be solidarity among the member states, but just and only if it is very much linked to the protection of the outside borders of the Union.
I think the idea of the mandatory mechanisms are correct, because without this kind of voluntary approach will just fall apart. The numbers, I think he's right to begin with these kinds of numbers, because the member states will just resist higher numbers because of all the internal political pressures and fears that are going on. But he's right about the mechanism, and I think we need to build the numbers up, because compared to the countries that we've been talking about today, Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, in the millions, we are talking about very small numbers relatively for the whole of Europe.
Is the Dublin Convention on Refugees, which stipulates that the country in which refugees first arrive is the one to process them, now dead?
The Dublin Convention de facto is dead, not just because people have misused it, but because it's completely inappropriate for modern asylum needs. I mean, the idea that that you have to apply in the first country that you come into, when we have completely new modern concepts of asylum and the way that people are moving around, I just don't think it's adequate for today. It was failing well before this crisis.
It simply doesn't function, because if it might function when 10 people or 100 arrives, but if they arrive thousands and 10,000s and they simply do not want to register and they don't want to cooperate, then what can you do? So we can say that it's enforced, but we see that actually on the field, in reality, it doesn't work.
It's winter soon. What needs to happen between now and the first snows for these migrants?
We're coming into a period where a country like Lebanon might implode, so there are going to be more asylum seekers across the Mediterranean, across the other theatres. And this is a tough area now, where unless the interior ministers get together and actually implement some of the things that the Commission have spoken about, that the Parliament's legislated on, we're going to be in serious trouble. This is the crunch point, the point at which people stop opting out and diluting the plans that are ready.
That's clear that those in need, they need shelter and the best equipment for that. But I would not, how should I say, give the promise that others should start their trips. Foremost, I do think that we have to help those asylum seekers, those in need who are now in the camps, in the refugee camps in Lebanon or in Turkey or in Jordania. They are there.
It seems to be coming.